Let's talk about how things can be turned around for South Africa. I'm joined by Emira Woods. She's Associate Fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies, and she works at the technology firm ThoughtWorks. Unemployment rate, 20% since 1996, above that. How do you get a handle on that? How do you bring those numbers down?
Well, first, I think it's not just South Africa. It's a global economy that's right now in crisis. There is growing inequality. There is worsening unemployment. South Africa is probably, at the epicenter, and particularly in terms of the African continent. So how do you begin to turn things around? You put in place an economy that works for all, that looks at issues of wages, particularly workers and the condition of workers. Clearly, South Africa has been right now focused on mining, one sector, the extractive industries. But if you look at commodity prices steadily in decline, you look at demand globally also in decline, whether it's from China or from elsewhere in the world, changing the economy is a critical element of putting things in a proper place. And putting the needs of workers first has to be a priority, not only for South Africa, but for really all the economies throughout the continent.
It's interesting, though. There's a lot of talk here in this country about income inequality. People struggling at the bottom, they look up, here are these people doing really well. You have a president in that country spending millions on his private home. How much trouble is he in, especially with that dynamic at play?
Well, I think there's a lot of concern about corruption throughout South Africa, about the fact that the elite, and in South Africa, let's be clear, it is primarily a white elite still. Over a decade after independence, after the fall of apartheid, you still have the structures of oppression very much in place, where the majority of the people who are black and brown are still at the bottom of the end of the totem pole. So it's almost, resonating a message for Bernie Sanders in the US and others, a populist message that says that the 1% cannot continue to enrich themselves at the expense of the majority. And there must be some substantive changes that both put in place the rights of workers, also the needs of a changing environment. With climate change, really at the forefront of concerns of people throughout the world, we've got to put in place an economy that is green, that brings jobs with decent wages, that brings manufacturing, that rebuilds infrastructure in a way that puts people to work with decent jobs at decent pay.
Zuma is giving his speech, the opposition saying, oh, this is the same old stuff. We've heard this before. Let's listen to a little bit of the excerpt, and then I want to get your reaction on the other side.
We should have prioritized the jobs plan for the 8.3 million South Africans. There should have been a deliberate focus on certain areas, manufacturing, agriculture. We should have been better at cutting the cabinet half. We should have been better on talking about how we balance South Africa's budget.
Should have done this, should have done that. What's your take?
Well, I think, the opposition in South Africa is gaining ground. We have to say, the African National Congress started out, let's remember, it's the oldest political party on the African continent, well over 100 years old, and yet many see it as out of touch with the majority of its constituents. So I think, the opposition is clamoring. Let's bring about an end to an economy that's working for so few and put in place an economy that meets the needs of particularly workers, particularly young people, using technology in new and interesting ways throughout the country and really throughout the continent. These are, basically what the demands are from people that are at the bottom of that totem pole, right? And their needs have got to be heard.
Thursday marked 26 years since Nelson Mandela was released from prison. And interestingly enough, you brought up Bernie Sanders last night. Hillary Clinton asked who was the world leader that she admired most. She mentioned Nelson Mandela. How far has South Africa come when it comes to race? Because you brought up whites and this economic disparity. What's the situation on the ground there?
Well, we have to say that there's a long way to go between the inspirational visions of Mandela and not only Mandela, but the women's movement within South Africa that had a vision based on equality, based on justice. Some of that vision is enshrined in things like, the National Charter, the foundational documents of the African National Congress and of South Africa. But unfortunately, there's been a long gap between the rhetoric of those documents and the reality on the ground for the majority of the people. And we've got to be able to recognize the importance of putting an economy in place that actually works for that majority of the people. It helps to improve the condition of workers, brings manufacturing, it transforms agriculture in the rural areas in ways that work for all. Not only, depending on a mining sector, but expands to other sectors in an economy that builds green jobs, that builds a future that can be a future that is better for blacks, for browns, for all in a new South Africa.
Emira Woods, thanks so much for coming in. Really appreciate it.